And as people join in, I'm sure we'll have a few more join in here in the next few minutes. Um, the topic for today's conversation is how do you handle difficult client moments? How do you when that tough conversation comes up, what do you do? And I remember a difficult situation that I had. We as real estate agents are fixers. That's what we do. That's why we got into the business. It's just the nature of our personality. And sometimes, unfortunately, we can't fix everything. We can't fix, um, the problems that a seller may have caused or a buyer may have caused. And I remember having to tell my seller that the buyer went down to the Art Van store and bought, it tells you how long ago that was. Um, but they bought like $6,000 worth of couches for their new house 3 days before the closing. And the bank, the lender, ran their credit the day before the closing and went, oopsie, we're not closing. You threw their debt to income ratios out of whack, and the deal was dead. And now, what do you do when you have to go to your seller and say, oh, remember how you were thinking about moving in a couple of days from now? Well, you're not now. How do you handle that conversation? Louise, have you ever had some fun stories?
Oh, I do some feel like who doesn't, right? When you do a few years this business, you always run into all kind of people. One thing for me was seller slash landlord at the time, but he let me know he had some
Yeah. I mean, I
investment
haven't logged
prop.
into any of them yet, so I figured I might as well just log in and
Or it's okay, Ashley, if you don't mind to mute yourself, that would be great. Thank you, Ashley. Perfect. So, anyway, we were talking about commission and where he got stuck. It was the $100 per transaction on leases. He said, "I'm not paying that. Never pay that. I done so many leases. I got so many prop. I'm not going to pay that." I said, "I'm sorry. Then we cannot do business together." And he looked at me, he thought I'm kind of stupid or crazy. He said, "Let me ask you a question. Does that make a business sense for you to lose a good client for $100 on a lease?" I said, "Yeah, it does make sense. Do you want to know why?" I said. And he said, "Actually, yes." And I said, "Because if I don't stand for my interest, if I don't protect my interest, you tell me how the heck I'm going to protect yours." And he was with a smile said, "You got me, right?" So fast forward, that past client passed away a few months ago. Now his wife, the widow, told me that my late husband told me to do business to sell all my properties. She wants to liquidate with you guys because that level of directness and stand. Sometimes we gotta take a stand. Sometimes we gotta say no to people. We don't want to act like desperation because they can smell us. I think if we stand for ourselves, higher likely people want to work with you and with us. So that's my story, Don, about tough.
Yeah, and I think it's a good point. We have to, before we can convince someone else of our value, we have to be convinced of our own value. And then, whether it's $100 or, $2,000, we have to make a stand and say, I understand how you feel. This is what I do for a living. This is how I feed my family and so on. And I bring value to the transaction. So I hope we can, come reach some sort of conclusion here. Um, I use a similar when somebody comes to me and they're upset. How do you handle that conversation? And I use a process that is very similar to what I use when I'm working expired listings. And that is I stay open. I listen to them. I vent. I allow them to vent. Um, I try, and sometimes it's really hard, but I try not to become defensive. that's one of the biggest mistakes I see agents make, is that when they get a complaint, when they have an issue that comes up, and somebody's upset with them, a client or customer or another agent is upset with them or upset with the situation. They don't even have to be upset with the agent. Agents tend to get defensive, and that's probably the worst thing you can do. I encourage agents to stay open and really, really listen, not just listen, but hear people, what they're concerned about, what their stress is, um, and go back to them and confirm what you're hearing from them, because sometimes we hear it wrong. Sometimes we interpret what they're saying in a way that they didn't mean it. So very often I'll go back and say, so if I understand correctly, your biggest concern about not closing on Thursday is that you're not going to be able to go ahead with your plans and move into your new house and so on and so forth. Now, it's a pretty reasonable concern, right? But I try to make sure that I'm understanding exactly what they're saying. And then after I've let them vent for a while, I will say to them, how do you think I could have done something differently? How do you feel I could have acted in a different way that would have had a better outcome? Um, and if ultimately, after the information you gather, you did make a mistake, then be direct about it and apologize straight out, no excuses. So that's kind of my process. Luigi, what do you do?
Sorry, Don, I was muted. On a seller that says what?
I'm just saying, when you have to have a hard conversation with a
Oh,
client, how do you approach it?
yeah. I mean, really, like the thing is asking a lot of questions. A lot of times you allow them to hear themselves. A lot of times they hearing themselves, it can contribute to solve the problems, because a lot of times they're going to say something they are not. They are so unrealistic, right? So so you just ask questions and and get in their world, because a lot of times people make decisions based on their emotions and feelings. They're not very how to say um, um, they're not logical, or like common sense a lot of times doesn't function over there. So it is our job. One of my founder of my previous broker used to say to us, Luigi, we are actually also psychologists here, not just realtors.
Yeah, so
So
true.
we really play multiple roles here. We got to be in their world, get where they're coming from. So, example, we just close on a. We're about to close. My wife and I help her when I can. First-time buyers. We all know how tough it is to deal with first-time buyers, for example. And I prepare them. It's tough to be a first-time buyer, and I make a list of why, because there is a lot of fear going on. So we got to be in their world. We got to distinguish, identify barriers they are not even aware of them. It's going to make it easier for them too, not just for you. And by the way, it's going to expedite the finding a home and for them to commit.
Yeah.
It's all about being in their world. That's really biggest thing I can say, Don.
Yeah, and Luigi, I think you're right. A friend of mine once described real estate as a drop of logic in a sea of emotion. And that's pretty accurate. It's a highly emotional transaction. There's a lot invested in it because we have our hopes and dreams invested in it. But I want to turn to Doug Hale, who's kind of the master of addressing tough situations. And Doug, how do you approach something when somebody comes at you and says, "Hey, I have a problem with this."
He's muted. Go ahead, Doug.
Right now, is that better?
Now, yes, go Doug.
There, it's set unmuted. You know what you guys have been saying. Again, I spent a lot of time doing the same thing. Luigi, when you talked about just listening, this is a highly emotional situation. It's a time where people don't know what questions to ask, right? I mean, we just don't know what questions to ask. You're, as Don and I talk about a lot, you're the calm in the storm. And so to be able to kind of make sense of what's happening, the order of which it's happening. I'm a guy that likes to just over communicate. I'm also a guy that likes to ask a lot of questions because I feel like there's a calmness when people, when they understand that you're in their world. And I'm leaning on a lot of the things that you guys have said, but yet can direct them in a way that emotionally they feel like they're supported, and they feel like we're walking through literally walking through each step with them. So I don't know if I answered your question, Don, but that's kind of where, I feel like more communication, more hand holding. Yeah,
I want
I'm all about hand holding, guys.
Yes, you are, Doug. You do a great job. Tracy and Stephanie, two members of our broker support team. I'd like to hear from you if you would. I'll go Tracy first.
I don't have really great stable internet, so I'll tell you that. The number one thing is you can't allow yourself to match the energy of your client. So when they're emotionally charged, you cannot be emotionally charged. So that's the first and foremost, is that you literally have to know how to deal with people who are emotional. And the first thing is your emotions cannot match them. You have to lower the temperature in the room. You have to understand whether you agree with their way that's caused them to, let's say, figure out how to immediately diffuse the situation, to be able to grab a hold of what they're saying. And I think Don may have said something like this, but to restate the problem. Because now you've taken emotion. I think what I heard you say is X. And from there, we know what we're dealing with. But prior to that, it's just a lot of emotion. The first thing you can do is get clarity in the room. Don't allow your emotions to match.
You just muted yourself, Tracy.
Did you hear anything I just said?
No, repeat the last sentence.
Oh, I said don't allow your energy to match theirs.
Yeah, we know that.
Stephanie, any thoughts?
No, just one in particular that I'm working with right now is an elderly woman. Recently, her husband passed away. She's having to move from one part of Florida to another part of Florida, and she's been very, ready to go, and then, oh, maybe I'm not ready, all of that. So that's been, a matter of patience. And I think that goes back to just kind of reading the room and knowing, who your client is, and really all she needed was somebody to listen to her. And so, once she will talk through her, anxieties with me, I don't usually even say anything, and then she'll just kind of get to that resolution on her own, where she is and what she needs to do. So I think it's just listening.
Listening is super
Good
important.
job.
I want to go on to,
Yep.
has anybody ever had a friend or family member list their home or buy a home with someone else, another realtor? Has that ever happened to anyone? Anyone? Yeah. I think we've all had it happen. And what do you do in that situation? Luis, any thoughts?
Oh man, it hurts. My first cousin, when I started real estate first, my first cousin went with a stranger and bought the house, and he knew I'm in real estate business. It hurted like hell. And I learned very fast not to let my feelings take me down. And what I learned from that, had I do my due diligence with my cousin, all I needed to do, here's the thing, pre-approval, you don't deal with me, you deal with a lender.
Mhm.
You know, again, being in their world, you know, before, you know, I don't need, he wanted to protect his financial situation. He didn't feel comfortable, his cousin knowing his finances, which is normal. And because of that, and because I didn't communicate upfront, I lost my, not just cousin, but created hostility, like almost like pretty much damaged their the relationship, because it became really, really not good.
Yeah.
So it
I
does
think that's
hurt like hell. Yeah.
it's a natural reaction for us to feel bad, to have
Yeah.
negative feelings about a situation like that. And then one day I realized, as you said, Louise, they didn't want me to know their personal finances.
Yeah.
They had overspent in their life. They were way up here in debt. They didn't want me to know that. And because they were living large, couldn't afford it, they were maxing out their credit cards and so on. And come to find out, the house, this was a buyer, a friend of mine, and the house that they bought, they was by all indications, a modest house. They couldn't afford it. They got turned down for the mortgage. And I was thankful at that point that I didn't have to have the conversation, the hard conversation about, oh, by the way, you can't buy anything else either. And so, like, don't ever call here again. I wouldn't say that. But same thing holds with family members. I actually try to avoid working with family members. And in fact, I think Tracy would know this, because when it was time for my daughter to buy her first house and she called me, and I said, no, I'm not going to work with you. And she said, well, why, Dad? Because you're a big girl and you can do it yourself. And talk to Tracy Johnson and she'll help you buy a house. And I wanted to separate that relationship, even though I love my daughter a lot, a great deal. I didn't want to be that dad who would walk into a house and say, well, this just isn't good enough for you, honey, because then they would be mad at me. I would dash their hopes and dreams. I didn't want to be helicopter dad. So I let Tracy, I let them get mad at Tracy. That's all I can say. Any thoughts, Tracy?
I liked them. I still like them. They liked me in the end. So it was a win for you and a win for me.
And for his daughter.
Yes.
So who else has ever had to deal with a situation like this where somebody, a friend or neighbor, coworker, whatever, is listed there? I mean, coworker, like in another job, maybe previously or so on, that they've listed their house with somebody else, or they've chosen another realtor to buy a house. How did it make you feel? Anybody?
So when I first started in real estate, I was working part-time as an agent and then full-time at another job. And I had two of my employees, I was a manager there, and I had two of the employees. Um, One of them, I told them about the house and I couldn't show it that weekend, and I was brand new, and they ended up putting an offer on it with somebody else, and I'm like, what did you do? Like, but it to me it's communication. Like, I have a relative right now that's looking for a house on the east coast of Michigan. And she's like, well, I didn't know you could work throughout Michigan. I thought you were just up north or whatever. And so I think it's just a lot of communication, just letting people know. But yes, it hurts your feelings when they choose somebody else, I think.
Yeah, it can hurt. And I think that reframing it and thinking about it in a different way, that this is really about them, it's not about you. Um, what I learned from these experiences, and there were more than a couple, but what I learned is, if I don't set the expectation from the very beginning, if I don't communicate what my skills are, what my ability to help them is, then it's largely on me about the outcome, right? Luigi, would you agree?
Absolutely. I mean, I've been doing real estate for 29 years, and I done a lot of deals. And I can say almost any deal I lost, it was really because something was lacking from me, not to blame or feel guilty, but if had I done something differently to prevent that from happening, predictably, I would have saved that deal or keep that client. So it's really, we want to go extra step in over communicate a lot of times. It's our job to educate. We are educators. That's why they are hiring us and over communicate, because that's going to save you a lot of clients. That's my input.
Yeah, speaking of helicopter dads and Google and AI, all of those things are other voices in the room during a transaction, whether it's the helicopter parents or it's this is something I found on Chat GPT, or my friend who works as a meat cutter at Meyer told me that this is the way real estate works. All of those things are voices in a transaction that are distracting to your relationship with the client. Tracy, how do you handle that stuff?
Well, the thing you have to think about is logic. And how's my internet? Is it stable enough for me to talk?
Not so
I
good.
don't think it is.
Okay.
Yeah, so I probably shouldn't talk.
I'm going to turn to Luigi then.
Thanks, Don. I mean, again, really, like it's just that communication, and prepare. If we prepare people up front, um, and which the topic, I'm sorry, Don, I didn't get the question you asked, Tracy.
When we go through a transaction, very often there are other voices in the room. Other voices whether it's the helicopter parents or it's siblings or it's, I saw this on Google or Chat GPT or whatever. They come back and they say, well, my friend told me, or my dad told me. And how do you combat that situation? How do you address that and get past that? And
very good.
As you say, Luigi, it goes back to setting expectations from the very beginning. If I'm going to be working with a buyer and I suspect that there's going to be other voices in the room, like a parent or sibling or whatever, I'm going to have that conversation in my come into the office meeting, which is what we talked about previously. I'm going to sit down with them and say, oh, by the way, just so we know, will there be anyone else who's going to be involved in this transaction? And lo and behold, very often they'll say, well, yeah, my parents are giving me the money. Okay, now we know we have another voice that's going to be in the room, don't we?
Yeah.
Okay. Or they say to me, like a situation I had very recently, well, all of my siblings and I own the house. Okay, now I know that I have 3 different clients, all combined into one. And that helps me understand how I'm going to communicate and how I'm going to make sure everybody is communicated with equally and in a timely manner. So again, setting expectations from the very beginning of your relationship is going to help you figure out how best to communicate with them.
Yeah. It's funny you said the helicopter dad or whatever, Don. My wife is dealing with a young couple. They just got married. The wife is expecting, and during the showing, the wife's mom would go with flashlight to look every little cracks, during the showings, and making. I wasn't there, but my wife told me, "Oh my God, like almost like forget the inspector." I mean, and now the son, it was actually the son's mom, the husband's mom. And then next showing, I went there and I saw her son, the husband, with flashlight doing the same thing. And I had to kind of, after the showing, I had to have a little chat with him. I said, let me just, I know I shared already how difficult it is to be a first-time buyer. But then I addressed the issue of parents, a mother involved. And I said, are you an engineer? I asked, she said, actually, no, but my brother is. I can see there is some, I said, I understand and I appreciate that you're looking thoroughly, but let me prepare you something. I promise you, if we go to the White House, we're going to find issues with the home. And in this price range we're looking to buy, for sure, guarantee you're going to find issues. So you just got to prepare them what to look after. And you hire the professional inspector. And mainly you got to focus on any life-threatening issues or structural problems with the house and stuff. You got to focus on major things, not the little cracks, So it's all about, again, preparing them.
One of the things I've gotten, comments that I've gotten from people in the last year and a half or thereabouts, since August 17 of 2024, was it? It seems so long ago. Anyway, from the NAR settlement is my brother-in-law told me that I have to sign a buyer's agency contract in order to see a house. And I guess the question is that true? And the answer is no. They can sign a property showing agreement. You can provide them what we call a property, its title is property showing agreement. We like to call it a permission slip. And that is, it gives you, the agent, the right to show a property and discloses that you have no agency relationship with that buyer at this time. If they elect to do that and go into a buyer's agency contract at some time later, it's perfectly okay. All right. So I want to make that clear. I know that that's a question that comes up even now, and we get a lot of calls about a lot of confusion about it. So wanted to share. What do you do when a seller calls you and says, we've been trying to sell our house for about 3 weeks now, and we haven't gotten a full price offer or higher. And we've decided that we want to choose another agent. What's that conversation look like? Luis, any thoughts?
Well, yeah, I mean, again, usually it can pop up, that conversation, or because the preparation was not done appropriately during listing presentation. Really, that's, because, for example, if it doesn't sell, especially in this market, it's either overpriced or house it needs some updating, and maybe those issues were not addressed. Example, I had a top agent in Century 21. When he would go and listen presentation, he would take 3 different dates, those status change forms from MLS. And he would say, okay, if the seller would say, it would be firm, I want to price it, overpriced it, he knew, I want to price it, he was adamant, price, okay, we can do this, let's do this, we're going to sign this at the price you wish. I don't think we're going to sell it, I hope I'm wrong, because I'm going to make more commission, but in case in 2 weeks, no activities, no offers, here is a second form, we're going to drop it for 10,000. And if no activities, for then 2 weeks later, also dated and with an additional 10,000 price drop. So if he would say, if they would not want to do it like that, why would I want to waste time again with this seller? If I knew, so it's all about preparation, because when they decided it's not gonna, they want to withdraw. I don't know how much power you have then, but go ahead, Don. But that's
Well,
me.
I think, again, I'm gonna, as many of you, if you don't know by now, I built my career on expired listings. I think most of you know that by now. And over 30 years of doing that, one of the very first things I learned in the business is the reason that people don't relist with their agent is because they never heard from their agent. Their agent, the house wasn't selling, they weren't getting showings, and so the agent got shy. They started to go into the retreat and not contact their agent. And what I promised my clients when I was working expires is you will hear from me every Tuesday morning. Monday's a bad day to hear from anybody, okay? But I said, you're going to hear from me every Tuesday. I will give you a report on how many showings have occurred, how many times it was brought up on the MLS, how many times people went in and found additional information, and how far they went along in that process. And so every single Tuesday, I delivered a report to every one of my listings showing how many times their homes had been brought up in a search. And then I would call them and say, how can we make your house more marketable? Let's talk about the ways that we can get a buyer in here. And when you do that, and they see that you're active and really, really helping them sell their house, then they're much less likely to fire you or not list with you. Does that make sense? Okay, so let's pretend you do all of that. Then what? What happens when they go, I appreciate all the nice emails you sent me, and no, I'm not going to reduce my price anymore. Yeah, you've done a great job, did everything you said you were going to do, but we still want to fire you. What do you do then? Crickets. Okay. My solution, it's not everybody's solution, but my solution is to give them a release unconditionally. I'm not going to ask them to pay me for my photos or my marketing time or any of that sort of stuff, because all that does is it leaves them with a bad taste in their mouth. That's my personal business decision. That's what I'm going to do about it. I'm saying, sorry, it didn't work out. It was an investment. It was my risk to go in and have those photos and videos and all of that done. And I wish you very well. I hope that that you're successful and can move ahead with your dreams. Be clean, be clear, and move on. Was that Doug trying to talk down in Florida?
I think he said, yep.
He's got to unmute himself, though. Okay.
Internet's great all over the place, right? No, what I wanted to say was that sounds a lot like me, done in the process, to just simply give them a pass to say, hey, we've done as much as we've said we could do. We've communicated every Tuesday. At this point in time, again, I'm just gonna let you go your own way. And I've had it happen where full circle, they've gone a different direction and then came back to us 3 months later, 6 months later, and said, Doug, you were right. So again, I kind of feel like what you do is what I do. Just let them go their own direction. You've done everything you possibly can do at that point. So
I want to touch on one quick thing, and then we'll open up for a few minutes of questions. When it comes to a purchase agreement, what is enforceable, or a transaction, let's say? What is enforceable? Phone conversations, texts, emails, or signed contracts? What's enforceable? Signed contracts. The end. You may have some legal standing with emails, but probably not, because emails are simply communications between agents and or sellers and buyers. The only thing that is really truly enforceable is a signed contracts. Texts are not contracts. Texts are not enforceable. Phone conversations, not enforceable. So I'm going to open it up to questions. We got a few questions in. chat. So, Kim says, what's in writing? If it's not in writing, it doesn't exist. That is the quick summation of the Michigan Statute of Frauds. That's exactly it. So, any questions?
And Don, let me just add one more thing, because when we talk to some agents in broker support, there is still sometimes confusion. Some agents think texting, communicating via text, it's in writing, which it's not. The texting, it falls in category of verbally, just like you were talking to them over the phone, and then buyer or seller says to you, I don't remember it. So treat text messages just like that. Text messages are not in writing, only emails. If it's some communications, but not contract and agreement and clauses, yes, in contracts or slash addendums, but any communication that you gonna have it to protect you if the case goes in court or anywhere, has to be an email, okay, no text. I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, I would totally agree. Any other questions before we sign off here? None. Going. Thank you all for joining, and we will see you next week.
Bye, guys.